Cardstack community. This is Chrissy, the founding director of the Cardstack project, coming to you from the land of the Web3. Today, we're going to talk about IP and Web3, and we're glad to be joined by Zhang, the founder and CEO of Spaceport, who's going to tell us about what we can unlock with bringing the world of intellectual property into the world of Web3, using the tools that we are using today, but also unlocking the potential of connecting what the tools we have with the really, really large market of intellectual property around the world, and hopefully make creative lives better. Welcome, Lee.
Good to be here. Thanks, Chris.
So we like to start getting an introduction from the founders and builders. Like, hey, how did you get to Web3, and what make you focus on this particular, very big area, not niche by any means, but certainly something within Web3 that is a kind of a next step beyond the NFT and the token revolution.
Yeah, sounds good. So, at a very high level here at Spaceport, we're building the tools for creators, brands, and agencies to monetize their intellectual property using Web3 technologies, right? And so, just a quick background on myself. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've spent a career in digital transformation. Previously founded a startup that grew to a multi-million-dollar business, which digitized operations for some of the largest brands in the world, such as McDonald's, Hyatt, 7-Eleven. My co-founder and CTO, Lita, helped launch a couple of billion-dollar gaming franchises. So BioShock and Saints Row back in the day, and has a lot of experience.
That's a classic now, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's actually a BioShock movie coming out. Just a quick plug for him. Hopefully he's in the
Nice. Nice. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Gotta beat The Last of Us in terms of adaptation. Hopefully it will.
Oh man, The Last of Us is so good. Yeah, I just started watching, and I'm looking forward to next Sunday's release already.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So how did we discover this problem? Well, first of all, both of us, Lita and I, were very problem oriented, right? Like we really want to find a big problem to solve, and then work on the solution. And so we actually connected a couple years back at the beginning of COVID. Because at the time I was transitioning my last business to fully remote, and I was realizing that, wow, there's like a big lack of tools for remote workforces.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I just started to realize that the digital transformation was happening much faster than ever before. And so at the time, linked up with Lita, who was also looking at building virtual worlds, metaverse tools, and we just started just throwing some ideas around in terms of what would be cool in this space and what we could do to help accelerate the growth of the metaverse and digital worlds. And so it wasn't until I exited my last business that we decided, okay, now's a great opportunity for us to work together and truly like dig deep and find a problem worth solving. And so what motivated us was that deep personal drive to help the metaverse grow. And we started to do a lot of market research in terms of the gaps in this industry. So we did a survey of all of the top companies in the space, Facebook, Microsoft, et cetera. And we created a rubric for which strengths and weaknesses they each had. And the two largest gaps that we saw, one was in hardware. And we didn't want to touch that, right? Leave Facebook to go spend tens of billions of dollars a year on solving that problem. And the other one was on content creation, right? And so for anyone that's ever put on an Oculus headset before, or tried to dive into a decentralized or metaverse world, there's just not a lot of things to do.
Yeah,
right? You go in there, you play around for maybe a couple hours, and then you just put it down. You don't touch it again. Right? And so we started spending more time thinking about, why is this the case? And what we noticed was there's a lot of first-party content. A lot of these companies were spending millions of dollars acquiring studios to go build more and more first-party content. But there was a large gap when it came to democratized grassroots content, right? So for you and I to dive in and to collaborate and create content that maybe we could sell, maybe we could just lend to other people to use in further content, whether or not that's experiences or like avatar wearables, or music, for instance. It was a very painful process. So we started to think about how we could solve that problem. And interestingly enough, we actually hadn't even thought about Web3 or crypto at that time. I was actually a pretty big crypto skeptic up until that point. But then I realized that the technology, the blockchain smart contracts technology that was being developed would be really good building blocks for what we wanted to provide, right? And so NFTs, for instance, right, is this a digital product that you can actually own, have ownership over, and can take from platform to platform. We realized that would be the best building block for content that we could introduce to creators.
Yeah.
Very quickly, we realized there's huge limitations to NFTs and the way that they were implemented before, right? So specifically, like ERC 721s, 1155s, these current standards, they only encoded the concept of ownership.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, I could buy something from you, or I could transfer it to you, or I could lend it to you, but I can't actually just give you the rights for one of these assets that I own. Right? So just to use like a crypto native analogy here, if I own a Azuki or a Bored Ape, I actually own the commercial rights to be able to exploit the artwork, the intellectual property.
Yeah, some of the projects allow that. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, and it's a huge opportunity. But as an owner, like, how do I give you the rights? If I wanted to print, that Azuki on a T-shirt or a coffee mug.
I have a blank T-shirt. I'm a good canvas for that.
Exactly, right. And so, like, doing it yourself, yeah, it makes sense. But like, if I wanted to work with a manufacturing company to go about that, I have to zoom out. I have to go off chain, and I have to sign a paper agreement. I have to negotiate the rights on that agreement. I have to rely on that company to do the accounting and to give me the royalties for when that T-shirt is sold, right? So what we realize is that there's a huge gap in the licensing space. And until licensing is solved for Web3 and for NFTs, then we can't see that content explosion, that democratized grassroots content creation that we set out to solve.
Yeah, and I think ownership of NFT, kind of have a question as to why do you want to own it? And right now it's mostly speculative. But if you own it and you can be smart about licensing your particular Bored Ape better than other people, and that becomes the Bored Ape, there's a whole lot of value in that, whether it's cash flow or business or an opportunity unlocked. So yeah, I think people who buy media rights for IP for comic book understand how valuable not only the comic book character are, let's be honest, like a lot of Marvel Cinema Universe are like the B-grade comic book characters, but because of the successful licensing of the IP and the using of that new expression within the MCU, they become more valuable than the, grade A back in the day. So it's really about the opportunity to be creative and clever about that. And I don't think we even begin to tap into that particular possibility space.
That's exactly right. And I have some friends over at a Web3 native project called 24/7 Comics that are looking to take comic book IP to the next level and bring that on chain and democratizing that. And that's gaining a lot of traction already. Right. And so, you mentioned the financialization and the financial opportunity here with licensing IP on chain, right? Like today in the traditional licensing world, that's a $300 billion industry, right? And it's a very old school industry, right? And so maybe just I'll use a real world example here, right? Yeah. So you might be familiar with licensing and intellectual property, but for the benefit of your listeners out there, right? So for example, if I'm Disney and I wanted to put Mickey Mouse on a T-shirt, right? Disney isn't in the business of manufacturing T-shirts themselves, so they license it out to another company to do it, similar to that Azuki example that I just used. And that's how creators and brands expand their markets through collaboration, right? To touch even more consumers and to provide them kind of a fan service that they're looking for. And what we're doing here at Spaceport really is developing the protocol and the first applications that makes that entire process faster, easier, present more opportunities than ever, really by leveraging blockchains for discoverability, contracting, royalty flows. And ultimately, we believe that we can help grow that industry into a multi-trillion-dollar industry by digitizing IP and by allowing crypto native IP collections out there to be able to license out their works.
Yeah, I think we've seen many times where making something easier with the technology just explode the use of it, and then the market just becomes way bigger than it was before. And I think one of the things that is, I think, surprise in the IP related space, music, is when people can subscribe to music and listen to all the music, they actually spend more money overall in an aggregate in music than ever before. So it does have that opportunity. Do you see more interest in crypto native project that has an NFT born 2017 onwards being more interested in that licensing thing? Or do you see this more of a traditional brand wanting to use this as a digital transformation, which is improving your processes to tap into more markets? Are you seeing this as a IP from the Web3 world or IP from the existing world using Web3 rails, or both?
Yeah, we see it from both, from purely like a dollars perspective, right? Clearly, there's an existing $300 billion market for licensing. And so for any creative revenues that we can introduce for traditional brands, there's just larger deals to be had, right, to begin with.
Right.
But that being said, I think the crypto native collections and IP projects out there, they're the ones who need the system the most.
Right.
Because they are native. They are lacking the infrastructure, the tools, the workforce to be able to manage licensing. And so I think as this market continues to grow, as we're kind of in a sort of a bear market, a winter right now. We're not seeing the same amount of creators and interest in native IPs right now. But as the market turns and as we go into the next bull market, I think we're going to become a critical resource for IP collections to be able to leverage licensing as a way to generate revenue for their projects.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So I think looking at the crypto native kind of collections, one of the things, and if you look at the kind of playbook for NFT launches, for example, what you hear, and this is usually after they've launched and stuff like that, is the artist, the person who actually makes the art, is actually not the party in the transaction. It's kind of like the studio model of Hollywood, where the star, before they have the pricing power and the negotiation power to be Tom Cruise, executive producer, director, stuntman, everything, and get this cut of the revenue, they were just like going to a job, acting and making something culturally relevant for 100 years, but getting paid, a day's wage, for lack of a better word. We're still in that phase of it. What's your own personal opinion about the actual creator, the people who are making this art, the people who are actually creating those things? What is their relationship in the Web3 way today, and where do you see that in the future? And there's something dear to my heart, because I feel like a lot of them, the actual people making the art's being gypped right now. It's my personal thoughts.
Yeah, it's a touchy subject, right? Because for one, a lot of these artists don't know if the project is going to be successful.
That's true.
The projects don't know either, right? And so, to a certain extent, there's a fair transaction up front that both parties feel comfortable with, but over time, that might become lopsided, with the collection generating tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of more revenue through these projects, and that's not being paid back to the original artist. So I guess we could look at how, and here I'm in the United States, so I'm going to talk about U.S. copyright law here, but there are actually some fail-safes built into copyright law that allows the original copyright holders, the creators, to be able to renegotiate their copyright deals after a period of time, and really just to solve for this issue, right? But as it stands right now, I believe that that's a pretty long time period.
Yeah.
So there's given the acceleration that we're seeing with technology and globalization, I do think that it would be helpful for projects over time to shorten that time span, right? And to give artists more incentive, because at the end of the day, if you win and the artist was a big portion of that, I think it's only fair that they can get a larger chunk of the proceeds there.
Makes sense. So, tell us a little bit about, obviously there is a need on these projects to expand to IP and as a way to not just say it's possible, like Bored Ape, but actually make it easier by way of a composable protocol. Different people bring different tools in the Web3, and that's really what's amazing about it. Walk me a little bit through what is a company or a project that's doing this. How would they do this? Do they say, I am going to do some wet signature to create the IP licensing, so that people who manufacture and say, hey, do you have the rights to do this, have something like that? And how does that go all the way through the metering and monitoring of the items, because some of these information, let's say enterprise sale, Shopify sales are not really on-chain data. And at the end of the day, how do you get paid on the other side if you have a claim either as a first party or if you sell your financial right as a second party? I know that's a lot, but I just kind of want to walk through what to me was an existing IP regime. Like I think I described the logic of what current today, and I want to see kind of your version of it so that we can maybe have some interesting conversation on how the Web3 technology stack applies.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I'll try to cover all of that.
It's a lot, but that's actually kind of the basic IP, royalty workstream.
It's a complicated process, right? Yeah. And so, in terms of how we would help IP owners go through this process, it's not fundamentally different, right? Both involve legal agreements. You could do a licensing deal using pen and paper today in digital worlds, in the metaverse, in crypto, but it's costly from both a time and money perspective. And so what our protocol does is to make that process more efficient using smart contracts, and allows for, like you mentioned, greater interoperability with the larger Web3 ecosystem. I'll speak to some of those potential opportunities. So just to walk through the process, right? With Spaceport, if I'm an artist, I'm a creator, I would and let's just say a traditional artist and creator, I'm not like minting my works already onto the blockchain. I can upload my works into one of our apps. It's called Spaceport Core, right? And you can kind of think of that as a staging environment, a CMS that allows existing IP owners to catalog their works. And then when they're ready, submit, case studies and fill out the metadata. And when they're ready, hit the upgrade button to make it Web3 compatible. Now, behind the scenes, what that does is it mints what we call a core NFT, and that makes that IP compatible with our protocols, along with all of the other protocols out there in the Web3 ecosystem.
Right.
Then I can immediately put my works in front of global brands and agencies and licensees to help accomplish my licensing goals. From there, it's just a few more clicks to get a deal done, and then have the royalties transferred directly to me through the protocol, which will handle the royalty splits, right? And so we like to think of that front end as almost like a sexier version of a MLS portal. If you ever look for a house,
for real estate broker to list their property and say, hey, everybody else, this is another property within our neighborhood or geographic area to do. So it's a curated, collaborative catalog making.
Exactly, right. And at the end of the day, everyone wins, right? Because the licensees, the buyers have more access to potential deals. Same for the IP owners. And there are existing entities in between that are facilitating deals today. Those are the agencies. And just like in real estate, agencies have a place here too to help curate and to help introduce these deals and to help make these deals close, right? And so there's kind of a little bit for everyone in the system that we've created. But ultimately, right, it's streamlining that process and increasing the efficiency and the composability of those final core NFTs that represent IP. And so just an example here, right? So as these deals are completed and signed on chain, royalty flows are sent directly to the owner of that IP NFT. That constructs a revenue flow for the holder of that NFT and basically provides a natural a pricing mechanism for that IP NFT. With that pricing mechanism, you could potentially sell that IP NFT on a secondary market to another owner who might figure out other ways to monetize that IP, or just wants to collect that royalty stream, right? And on top of that, you might be able to feed that IP NFT into a collateralized lending scheme protocol and use that money to create more works and to create more IP, right? And that's traditionally even more complicated process where you'd have to find a lender, you'd have to find a partner to price your existing real world IP asset. So there's a lot of external opportunities here.
For sure. And it's so complicated that it really only makes sense with like major artist catalog in aggregate, right? So if you're going to do that work to evaluate it, how much is Bruce Springsteen music publishing right work? That's an investment banking deal, right? There's a lot of people in Patagonia vest that has to sit in a room to sort that through. Not something that's available to a regular person.
Exactly. Right. Right. Yeah. No. There's a lot of overhead involved in traditional IP deals, tens of thousands of dollars, right? Just in legal fees and
Hmm.
accounting fees just to get started. So if you lower that barrier to entry, right, and you think on a smaller scale on that long tail, how many millions, hundreds of millions of creators out there are creating really interesting intellectual property that
Hmm.
that they could license out and that they can generate additional value off of. And that exponential growth, everyone working together and creating more and more structures. That's what we originally hoped to achieve when we set out to create Spaceport, and we
Yeah.
believe that's what will happen over the next few years.
Yeah, it's really interesting to kind of focus, especially from a Web3 going through this kind of, kind of a adolescent moment of self-worth. It's like, is this all worth anything? If it generates cash flow for you, like this, if you wrote a song that's culturally important in the 70s, you're still getting a check. That's meaningful, right? Like that is not quite generational wealth, right? It is really just like kind of like the type of thing you can depend on. Culture accumulates and it adds to it, and I certainly do not hope that the culture we're creating in this kind of time, where there's pre-metaverse or during this NFT thing, becomes more long-lasting. Not in terms of just its cultural impact, which it may not, but certainly if there is cash flow that comes out of it. Wouldn't be great to make that as real as a recording on a 8-inch reel, right? That we shouldn't be in a less good situation with the media creation tool today to create the long-lasting meaning.
That's exactly right, and I think at the end of the day, it's solving real world problems, and that's what will propel Web3 and the creators and the artists behind Web3 into the mainstream, right? And provide this long term wealth accrual for artists overall. It can't just be all about memes and degenning into buying NFTs and financialization
Right.
of this space, right? Short term, a lot of people have made a lot of money off of that, but kind of for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And longer term, I think it's the creators and the artists out there that are doing it for the right reasons, solving real world problems, solving real world demand for their art and creations. That's where we're going to see success.
Absolutely. It's really interesting to look at this from an aspects of doing by right for creator, was something I care very deeply about, but also kind of figuring out how do we make sure that the next thing we do, let's say the metaverse or Web3, is not captured by big organization that has this first party IP and nothing else. It would be very sad if Microsoft, which famously used Halo with the small studio of Bungie as to create the first party, but then everything came after that, right? That's just a little bit of a seed. What we're probably seeing in the metaverse, in the meta sense, a Facebook sense, is that second wave of adoption isn't there because people are like, Facebook, you're doing this to avoid the Apple platform capture. I'm not doing it to put my content in a thing because I'm worried about your capture, like Zuckerberg's capture. It's very hard to bait people into something that you're avoiding from the other. It's quite recursive. But do you see that the metaverse is in this current form with this more centralized party, whether it's Meta doing it, is that restricting the creativity in that form? Are people more appealed to go outside the metaverse because they're worried about platform capture?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think metaverse as a term, it's one of those things you like ask 10 people what it means and they give you 10 different explanations.
Yep.
And so I just to kind of define it in terms that we believe in, right? We think about the concept of the open metaverse.
Open metaverse, yeah.
Yeah, which is this larger digital ecosystem where you can take your assets anywhere. Right. And ideally, there are going to be centralized entities, just like in the real world. You're going to have large centralized entities because it's more efficient. Right. And they're able to pool their finances and create larger works.
Yep.
Right. And there's a time and place for your AAA game or your blockbuster movie. But that doesn't mean that the smaller creators have to go by the same rules. And so I think that the way I see larger brands coming into the space is that it's great validation for the creators in this space. it's great education for the mainstream in terms of what's possible when it comes to Web3 technologies and metaverse digital world technologies. But as a community, as protocol builders and as artists, smaller artists in the space, what we should be striving for is that open metaverse allows for the integration of centralized entities, big players, large brands, as well as the smaller players, right? And we're also starting to see large brands starting to embrace that mindset, right? And so, recently with Reddit's launch of digital collectible avatars, they didn't have to launch that as NFTs. They didn't have to launch that on Polygon, right? They could have gone and created their own closed ecosystem.
Yeah, Reddit chain.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And well, as some companies attempted to do in the previous years and realized, that wasn't effective. Right. You're not getting the broad audience that you were hoping to get and the kind of cultural value over time that you hope to achieve. And so Reddit, Starbucks, with their Odyssey customer loyalty program, Nike with their .swoosh campaign, right? They're all being launched on open chains. Well, specifically in this case, Polygon, and with the intention of being part of that open ecosystem. And so, I think just as creators are realizing that it's okay to work in the same space as larger brands are also realizing that it's more effective to work in a space which allows for open collaboration.
Yeah, I think this idea of connectivity between the brand and other people and what's going on has to be something more appealing than creating your own app within the Facebook ecosystem that nobody ever downloads, right? Like, I think there's a little bit of a model differences between the apps approach, which work really well on mobile devices, but with the apps approach, I think in the metaverse, it doesn't make as much sense than if there is true connectivity, not just isolated worlds and such like that. So I absolutely believe that the openness that Web3 suggests and the metaverse, which right now isn't very open, I think my personal experience in 3D-based experiences in the metaverse domain seems more open in the Roblox universe. I've seen things, but that's still not an open metaverse by any means. It's less control and less AAA in its kind of DNA than the meta approach, but it remain to see what the Apple approach would be, which I can only imagine to be somewhat like the inverse of an open metaverse. But as an Apple fanboy, I enjoy the experience, and as a open web enthusiast, I'm a little bit worried about what that would mean.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, which is, for some of these players, they're so far ahead of the curve, right? So for Apple, right, it's still completely secretive, their headset program, but a lot of people have suspected that they've been working on this for years and have been implementing features into our phones to test them out for the launch of their headset. And it's so exciting to think that there is a player out there who is going to launch something that potentially will change all of our lives, right? We put on this headset, it's just going to work. It's going to be better than everything else that we've used in the past. And it's going to integrate the digital world more so than ever with our day-to-day lives. But then this fear that it's going to be completely locked down and it's not going to support the open metaverse. I mean, I think this is the time for us as creators, as startup founders, as collective to stand up and say, we're looking for open collaboration because it will benefit these larger corporations overall to allow an open ecosystem, right? Look at the internet, for example, right? The internet was released as an open source product and an open protocol. That had been centralized, it would never have been as big as it is today.
Yeah, and there were actually centralized online services that are footnoted history. You have to scroll down very much in Wikipedia to find that there was CompuServe or something like that, which is original online service text-based. So I think the people always ask me, why do you need a decentralization? Say, historically, decentralization eventually expands the addressable market for everybody involved, right? The internet expanded the marketplace, and I'm absolutely certain that an open metaverse is a much bigger marketplace than a closed metaverse, however big that may be. And I think it's very hard to attribute, what part of it is because of the perfection of the Apple craftsmanship to make the mobile web or mobile internet happened, and how much of it is the dogged commitment to say, let's keep websites and Safari open, and a lot of the innovation actually happened there. And then apps, sometimes you look at the apps from big brands, they're not as good as the website, right? So still it's true, and I hope that the web, I'm a web enthusiast as much as I'm a Web3 enthusiast. I think I'm the original open web champion, and in that kind of dogged attempt to make sure that the web itself, the delivery channel, which could be 3D experiences, is pretty good. Like some of the best experience I've experienced within the Metaverse, within the Oculus ecosystem, are actually websites. And so I really hope that we continue moving forward on not only the asset base, which I think is one aspect, but also making sure that there's an open way of rendering this stuff.
Couldn't agree more. Chris, you mentioned earlier on this podcast that you're working on a project in the IP space as well. So would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think, I've been working in the music industry and thinking about musical rights. And now, again, that's a much more mature market. And there's an interest in that market to do a couple of things, one of which is like this music NFT, but that's not where I'm involved in. There are real interests in thinking about understanding what rights actually exist. One of the big problem with music industries, they don't even know exactly what they own, right? Because a lot of music songs, if you've ever seen a Beyonce song, that's like 8 writers, right? And then they sell the rights and they have different partnership deals. So my original work on there, and this was a few years ago, was to think about how to build a kind of a real world asset mirror registry of what exists and kind of onboard the off-chain data onto an on-chain, at least on-chain available registry. Tricky thing, you can't really put every liner note on the blockchain. It will flood it and it won't be. So it's mostly an anchoring problem. How do I know that this is on? But there was a lot of work that was when we were debating that. It's like, okay, now that I know, assuming there is a way to kind of get this catalog on chain some way, like catalog anchored on chain, is there a way to kind of mint a particular rights and then make it transferable, where what you're owning is not the song? What does that really mean? I can listen to the song on my AirPods. I mean, that's not the media file that I'm owning, but the rights to receive the revenue is quite concrete. And that's a lot of times when you see these big deals of like $4 billion purchase a music catalog, they're really buying the cash flow. That's really what it is. So there's a real opportunity to do that. And obviously the what you're working on, it seems to be kind of like more grassroots and bottom up on like one asset at a time. The music asset is definitely kind of more bulk in the way it's currently done today. But I gotta say, Metaverse, 3D experiences, or even mobile social experience without music is dead. Right? Music will always be a part of meaningful experiences as it moves us as human beings. And to see that the music industries is locking their rights in a way that not only makes it annoying for people who want to use music on the YouTube channel, right? But also leaving all the money on the table for the economic value that experience, including music, could get. And everybody just use this crappy royalty-free music instead of the one that has meaning. I still think that you got to work from the music industry. I've been in conversation with executives from Warner Music, Sony Music, thinking about that. It's a long way from that road to that composability, but they are definitely heading there. And I think music NFT is a good starting point for them to take a couple of things and put it in a purely natural way. But the catalog is really where the value is, and I really think that can be done. So it will even out. I believe that the same way we're starting to see that stable coins, volatile asset, reward tokens and stuff like that are evening out all as tokens in ERC20. Hopefully you will see IP and IP rights, even out and flatten out in a set of standards that, regardless of whether it's the likeness of King Charles or is the picture of an Azuki, that it may actually clear or settle in a similar way, as well as a song from Bruce Springsteen from his B-side. And could we combine that? It would be interesting to get Azuki and King Charles and Bruce Springsteen in a media expression of Metaverse. I'm waiting for that thing to happen and happen legally.
Yeah, no, and think about those derivative works, right? And the combination of all of these different IPs. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, like you really couldn't even effectively sub-license and receive royalties off of that. And that you bring up a really interesting point, which is once you have these building blocks, like you can combine them. You can have a scene which has a song playing and artwork on the walls and some video playing in front of you on a virtual TV, and these could all be licensed works.
Yeah,
right? It'd be minimal cost to construct, and it could provide long-term revenue and value for the original creators. Yeah. And no matter where it's used, it could, you might be able to spin this up on different virtual worlds, different products. And possibilities really are endless once you get to that point. Who knows? It could be sooner than we think.
I think so. I think what you're working on is helping, maybe through the help of protocol, but also agents who are going to look and give their clients more opportunity to make the deal. Making deals are hard, right? And we're going to need, like the same way like all the people try to disrupt real estate and try to make an alternative to multiple listing service MLS, they're losing the fact that the human judgment of like, who's going to buy this crappy house? And then the AI may buy it, but they will be the only one buying it. You're going to lose billions. And they did. I think human in helping make the deal to grease the transactional friction, it's going to be very valuable. Lawyers for transaction, that we can eliminate. So I love what you're trying to do. Help the human make the deal, but just make the deal like electronically. You're doing the right thing. Some of the things that we're working on at Cardstack is, from our experience of dealing with these kind of larger catalog, we realized that the calculation of royalty, right? And if you look at how Music Society calculate, it's largely a black box process of like churning data files and running long-running query on mainframes and stuff like that. That's not a good fit for blockchain, especially if you have complex deal for like tranching and aggregating like micro pennies from everywhere, pulling together and figure out what net how much you get this month, right? That is never going to be a good use case of the type of accounting that we are able to support in blockchain. So a lot of the work we've been working on in solving that problem, again, we're picking on this one thing, is to essentially do net settlement using data analytics that has on-chain consequences. So we can take on-chain data, off-chain feeds, and then decide, okay, if you trust me or trust this algorithm, then you get 3 cents, and then you essentially get an airdrop from a pool from that amount without having to write the actual line item on it, which I think is pretty cool. It's like a combination of royalty processing in the music business, in the royalty society kind of sense, combined with airdrops in the way it actually implemented. And the cool thing is that we added this feature, I think, late December called rollover. So if you do not claim your airdrop, and we know that in that time you didn't come and claim it, we'll just add it to the next one. So you can claim it whenever you want. And we're working on a feature this quarter on counterfactualness. So you can actually have an account that has an ID that you don't have to pre-give me. So you don't need to have a wallet. And then you can claim that account from it, and you can just accrue in these different accounts, and you can just mint. We use Saves, which is a smart contract wallet, as the destination. And this takes away from the, can I have your Ethereum address from your MetaMask as the first thing you ask, which nobody can do.
That's great. Anything that reduces friction, right? I mean, like it's just this easy 30-step process to set up your wallet.
Right, absolutely. And if you have this situation where you have to give the wallet to someone for them to begin their accounting, it's even worse. So we're focusing on like lower level of the stack, try to make sure that we have net settlement of revenue, make sure that you have counterfactual ability to have account that can be accruing before you even claim it or before you even onboard it to Web3. So those are the things. But please help people understand the market and the opportunity and make the deals, even however small, so that the agency, the marketing people, and maybe even the people who are CFO is like, we must monetize in the metaverse. I mean, it sounds pretty bullshit, but digital transformation a lot of times is bullshit from the C-suite that actually made a real impact on the customers in a couple of years, if done correctly.
I think you're right. I mean, that gap between reality, right? The C-suite level talk and reality is starting to close, right? Starting to realize, okay, yeah, maybe we should just act on things, and they're starting to see results right away. And so, that's beautiful. I love to see that. I mean, the things that you're implementing right now, it's like we're early days right now.
Very.
Still. Yeah, in development, we're trying to piece things together and make it work on our own. But what's really cool is that there's so many projects out there that are like trying to tackle each one of these individual key And we're seeing more and more of them, and we can build off of them as well, right? The two of us, looking at, you mentioned, this issue of like computation and trust. Now there are all these blockchains that are implementing ZK rollups.
Yes.
And that could be a great tool for us to offload that computational effort. And is that something you guys are looking into as well?
Yeah, I think for being, ZK rollup, again, usually end up running some sort of smart contract language. So it's still a transactional database, more like an Oracle database, and that's like an analytical pipeline. We're working on an analytical pipeline, but an analytical pipeline still requires a transactional database to keep track of like the raw facts that's being analyzed. So the mainnet is just not the approach we want to use. So there may be a rollup for music metadata expression at the item level. So that is a lot bigger than what will fit in the mainnet database, but it's still transactional data. But again, maybe the ticks, like the actual playback or the thing, is on another rollup, right? Because it's more efficient and has less things. So you can actually use multiple rollups of different performance, the same way microservices in big tech company, they use different database for different use case and workload. For advertising views, this is it. For CRM, they use a different database. But the important thing is that to make the decision of how much money to distribute, you got to look at all the database. So we have to basically treat this computational layer as a type of a data warehouse. So you take all these facts together and munch them together, and then write back the chain and say, okay, you get that, and then you have to distribute the money somewhere. So that's the thing about double spend protection. You have to distribute on a particular chain, like Polygon. You can't say you can retrieve money in these 4 places, and you don't know if you have retrieved it 3 times or 4 times, right? But that's the only real differences. But I do definitely think that as people are accepting that the multi-chain is the right way, they're not going to start thinking about chains as necessarily ecosystem and community. They start thinking about them as ledgers to keep track of certain type of data, and then start shopping for capability and characteristic and performance, because they know that they can add that one on chain and have it transparent without necessarily losing the fact that maybe to settle out the payment, you use a Polygon or even a mainnet, if that makes sense. But to count the views, who's going to write a transaction, even a signature on that? So we expect there to be a variety of implementation, and I like different databases available on Amazon Web Service Marketplace. They're all used for different purposes, and I expect the same thing to arise really as a technologist.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is kind of turning into a working session for us to work on the product.
Hey, this is the forefront here. Like, so we're just trying to figure out, like, if you were trying to make something useful, which is a little bit different, trying to do a research to make things more decentralized, which is valuable. But I think I lean a little bit to the application domain. We are at the edge every day and running into like, that's not thought through yet. But I'm so glad that we're able to talk about, I think, the part that is working today. The future is already here, just unevenly distributed. There's no reason with the tools that you have and the tools that we've built that we can't onboard 100, 1,000 times more people today. But if the tools get a lot bigger, it's going to be more than 1,000 times.
Totally agree.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to share today about your progress and things that are relevant and things that maybe on the wish list of what you would like to see?
Well, we have some really interesting customer deals on the docket that I can't announce today, but are coming up. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about that again in the near future.
Sounds good.
But just really enjoyed being here today, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on.
Likewise, and I love to hear people who maybe one-time crypto skeptic, because it does look pretty bad. Like, I gotta say, it's like the cringe factor of seeing the industry evolve in front of my eyes is sometimes more than I can bear. But it's always great to see people who come in knowing everything they know, doing the research and the rubric that and saying, you know what, net, all consider, I want to be a part of this, and I want to solve some of the problems. And I welcome you to this journey, and congratulations on your recent raise. I think that is a baby step towards what I believe would be the place where we can onboard IP creators, where they say, hey, I feel like I'm being heard for the first time, not just patronizingly, but I got my check.
Exactly right.
Show me that. Like when you have a person who has just ask them to frame up the Etherscan transaction. That I think that is as valuable as your first CD or your first advance check, right? Like that has to be something culturally meaningful.
I totally agree. I think we're gonna have to do that, and I'll definitely send that over to you once it's ready.
Beautiful. And thank you very much, Lee, for your time today. And as a community, we thank you for your time and attention. I know that bringing makers and creators and people who are at the forefront and hearing, hopefully recording and journalizing what they're doing really helps make this a much more meaningful industry than seeing numbers going up. The numbers will go up, and hopefully one day is revenue share, and royalty. That's going to create the substance, the economic substance, to make this the true transformation of the world, finance included, that we see. So thank you very much for your time and attention. And until next time, take care.